I went exploring in Utah's Canyonlands. I shouldn't have ignored the warnings. Professor James Whitaker killed the engine of his dust-covered Jeep and sat for a moment, studying the faded warning sign at the Needles Outpost entrance. The mid-afternoon sun rendered the red sandstone formations in the distance almost too vibrant to look at directly, their spires jutting from the earth like ancient fingers reaching for the cloudless Utah sky. Maze District, restricted area, no entry, without authorization. The sign was newer than the others, not yet bleached by the relentless sun. James ran a weathered hand through his salt and pepper hair and reached for the folder on the passenger seat. Inside was a printed copy of the last email Mia Reynolds had sent him 3 weeks ago. Professor Whitaker, I found something in the southern quadrant that doesn't match any cataloged petroglyphs. The patterns repeat through several canyons in a geometric progression that seems deliberate. Park records show no previous documentation of these markings. I'm heading deeper tomorrow to photograph the largest concentration I've found. Something about these symbols feels important, almost like they're waiting to be read. We'll update when I'm back in range. Mia. But Mia hadn't updated. Her satellite phone had gone dark that same night. The official search had lasted only 5 days before the Park Service declared it another unfortunate case of an experienced hiker underestimating the Maze District's treacherous terrain. James knew better. In 20 years of studying the geological formations of the American Southwest, he'd never had a student as meticulous as Mia Reynolds. She wouldn't have taken unnecessary risks. She wouldn't have ignored warning signs. Something else had happened out there. The door to the outpost creaked open, and Ranger Daniela Ortiz stepped out, her expression unreadable beneath her wide-brimmed hat. Professor Whitaker, she called, crossing the gravel lot. I was hoping you'd reconsider this expedition. James tucked the folder into his backpack. You know, I can't do that, Ranger Ortiz. Daniela, please. She leaned against his Jeep, arms crossed. And I know how much you care about your students, but the maze doesn't give up its dead easily. You're assuming she's dead. Daniela's eyes narrowed. 3 weeks alone in that terrain. The alternatives aren't much better. A second vehicle pulled into the lot. A battered pickup truck with University of Utah stickers plastering the bumper. Alex Carver stepped out, lanky frame unfolding like a pocket knife. His eyes were shadowed from lack of sleep, his movements jittery with nervous energy. Professor? He nodded, then turned to Daniela. Ranger Ortiz? I'm Alex Carver, Mia's roommate. You shouldn't be here, Daniela said flatly. This isn't a sanctioned rescue operation. With all due respect, I know Mia's research better than anyone. Alex pulled a weathered leather journal from his backpack. This is her field notebook from the last expedition, the official one before she went back alone. There are coordinates, sketches of the petroglyphs she mentioned. James took the journal, flipping through pages of meticulous notes in Mia's precise handwriting. Near the back, several pages were dedicated to circular symbols arranged in interlocking patterns. These don't look like any Native American petroglyphs I've seen, James murmured. They're not, Alex confirmed. Mia ran them past Dr. Littlefeather in Indigenous Studies. He said they don't match any known pictographic system in North America. Daniela peered over James's shoulder at the journal. Something in her expression shifted. I've seen those before, she said quietly. Both men turned to her. Where? James asked. Daniela hesitated, then gestured toward the restricted area. 5 years ago, I was part of the team that went in after those 3 hikers disappeared. We found similar markings in a canyon that wasn't on any of our maps. I took photos, included them in my report. Next thing I know, that section is being declared permanently off limits, and my photos are gone from the server. You think the Park Service is covering something up? Alex asked. I think there are parts of these canyons that don't make sense, Daniela replied carefully. Places where compasses spin and GPS signals bounce back wrong. Places where the rock, she stopped herself. Where the rock what? James prompted. Nothing, just desert mirages and dehydration playing tricks. She straightened her hat. If we're doing this, we need to move. We have about 4 hours of daylight left to reach the first checkpoint. As they unpacked supplies and prepared for the hike, James noticed Daniela slipping extra water, emergency flares, and a satellite phone into her pack. Expecting trouble? He asked quietly. Always prepare for worst-case scenarios in the maze, she replied. Most people who die out here do so because they think they know better than the wilderness. I've been exploring these canyons for decades, James said defensively. Then you should know better than anyone what they can do to the unprepared. Daniela nodded toward the distant formations. The Maze District has the highest ranger-to-visitor ratio in the park system. Know why? Because it's trying to kill you. The terrain, the heat, the lack of water. It's all designed to make you pay for every mistake. You talk about it like it's alive, Alex observed, hoisting his pack. Daniela didn't smile. 3 search party members reported auditory hallucinations last time. Said they could hear voices coming from inside the stone. We wrote it off as dehydration. And now? James asked. Now I'm making sure we each carry 2 gallons of water per day. She shouldered her pack. Let's move. Stay close. Follow exactly where I step. And if either of you starts hearing things, well, drink water first. Then tell me. As they set off toward the towering red spires, James glanced back at the warning sign once more. The wind had picked up, whistling through the canyon in a way that almost sounded like distant voices. Alex stopped suddenly, cocking his head. Did you hear that? Hear what? James asked. Alex frowned, then shook his head. Nothing, just the wind. Above them, dark clouds began gathering with unexpected speed. The air pressure dropped, and the light shifted, casting the canyons ahead in deep shadow. James felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Daniela looked skyward, her expression troubled. Storms coming. That wasn't in today's forecast. Should we turn back? Alex asked. Too late now, she replied. Once we're in the canyons, we're committed. The flash flood risk makes retreating more dangerous than continuing to higher ground. As they crossed the invisible boundary into the restricted area, James couldn't shake the feeling that the park, or something within it, was watching them. The warning signs loomed in his mind, not just the physical signs they'd passed, but Mia's strange final message, Daniela's obvious apprehension, and the storm that seemed to have materialized from nowhere. Every instinct told him to turn back. Behind them, the wind picked up, erasing their footprints from the sand. The Maze District earned its name honestly. By late afternoon, the narrow passageways between towering sandstone walls had turned their path into a disorienting series of switchbacks. The storm that had threatened earlier now hovered at the edges of the horizon, neither advancing nor retreating, as if waiting. We should be approaching Joint Trail, Daniela said, consulting her topographical map. Mia's coordinates from her journal suggest she camped about 2 miles beyond it. James nodded. But something felt off about the landscape. The familiar landmarks he'd studied for years seemed subtly altered, a spire slightly taller than he remembered, a boulder formation that appeared to have shifted position since his last visit. Professor? Alex had stopped, staring at the rock face beside them. Look at this. A series of shallow depressions marked the sandstone in a pattern too regular to be natural erosion. James ran his fingers over them, feeling a strange vibration beneath his touch. Interesting, he murmured. These could be natural, but the spacing is remarkably consistent. They form a circle, Daniela observed, stepping back to take in the pattern. Like the ones in Mia's journal, but older, Alex added. Much older. These have been weathered by centuries of wind and rain. James pressed his palm flat against the center of the pattern. For a brief moment, he could have sworn the stone felt warm, almost like flesh with a pulse beneath it. "Let's keep moving," he said, withdrawing his hand quickly. As they continued deeper into the canyon system, the walls rose higher on either side, cutting off more of the sky with each turn. Their voices began to sound strange, echoing back a half-second too late, sometimes with subtle distortions that made their own words unrecognizable. "Did you hear that?" Alex asked suddenly, stopping in his tracks. "Hear what?" Daniela's hand moved instinctively to her sidearm. "I said something, and the echo..." Alex trailed off, looking confused. The echo didn't match. James had noticed it too, but had been trying to rationalize it as an acoustic peculiarity of the canyon. Sound can play tricks in places like this, the way the waves bounce off irregular surfaces. "No," Alex interrupted. "I said check the map, but the echo came back as..." He hesitated. "As something else. Words I didn't say." Daniela's expression darkened. "Like what?" "Like deeper or below or something." I couldn't quite make it out. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. James found himself straining to hear any ambient sounds, but the canyon had gone eerily quiet. No birds, no insects, not even the whisper of wind. "Let's keep moving," Daniela finally said, her voice deliberately steady. "Unusual acoustics aside, we need to make camp before we lose the light." The path narrowed further, forcing them to walk single file through passages so tight they had to remove their packs and push them ahead. The rock walls pressed in from both sides, cool and slightly damp, despite the desert heat. "This doesn't look right," Daniela said, as they emerged into a small clearing. "According to the map, we should have reached a wider section by now." James consulted his GPS, tapping the screen in frustration. "No signal. That's unusual." "The canyon walls must be interfering," Alex suggested. "No," Daniela shook her head. "Park rangers maintain signal boosters throughout this section precisely because of how dangerous it is. We should have coverage." The sky above had darkened to a deep purple blue, though sunset was still an hour away. The storm clouds had drawn closer, circling overhead like vultures. "Wait," James said suddenly. "I recognize this place." He pointed to a distinctive split in the canyon wall. "That's Cathedral Arch. We've somehow circled back to where we were 2 hours ago." "That's impossible," Daniela insisted. "We've been moving in a consistent direction." "Yet here we are," James replied grimly. Alex dropped his pack and pulled out Mia's journal, flipping through the pages with increasing agitation. "She mentions this. Listen, Day 4. The canyons seem to rearrange themselves when I'm not looking. Landmarks I've tagged appear in impossible locations. I've started marking my path with string, but twice now I've found the string making patterns I didn't create." "That's ridiculous," Daniela said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Canyons don't move." "Let's make camp here," James decided, looking at the darkening sky. "We're all tired. Things will make more sense in the morning." They set up their tents in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As night fell completely, the temperature dropped sharply. James built a small fire, its flames casting long, dancing shadows on the surrounding rock walls. "Those shadows," Alex whispered after dinner, staring into the darkness beyond their campfire. "They don't match what's casting them." James had been noticing the same thing, but had been trying to attribute it to trick of the light. The shadows seemed to move with subtle independence from the objects casting them, reaching, stretching, almost exploring. "It's just the fire," Daniela said firmly. "Flames are unpredictable." But even as she spoke, her shadow on the canyon wall behind her seemed to turn its head slightly, as if looking at something none of them could see. "I'm going to do a perimeter check," she announced abruptly, standing and switching on her flashlight. "Don't wander off." Once she was gone, Alex leaned toward James. "Professor, I need to show you something." He pulled out Mia's journal again, turning to one of the final entries. "This is from her last documented day. She drew this." The page showed a precise map of what appeared to be their current location, with the cathedral arch clearly marked. Next to it was a smaller sketch of a narrow passage between two pillar-like rock formations, and beyond that, a circular chamber. Annotations in Mia's handwriting noted, "The passage only appears at twilight. The entrance shifts. Follow the shadows where they shouldn't be." "She was seeing the same things we are," Alex whispered. James was about to respond when Daniela's voice called from the darkness. "Professor Carver, you need to see this." They found her about 50 yards from camp, her flashlight trained on a small alcove in the rock face. Inside was a camp setup, a small tent, a backpack, cooking equipment, all of it covered in a fine layer of red dust, but otherwise untouched. "It's Mia's," Alex confirmed, examining the backpack. "This is her gear." "Look at the state of it," Daniela said. "No signs of struggle, no blood, no animal interference. It's like she just walked away." James examined the site carefully. The dust layer is uniform. This has been undisturbed for weeks. "But we've been searching for her campsite for hours," Alex said. "We didn't miss it," Daniela said quietly. "It wasn't here before." "That's not possible," James insisted. "None of this is possible," she shot back. "The circular path, the moving shadows, now this appearing out of nowhere. We need to radio for extraction at first light." James knelt and examined the ground around the tent. A series of footprints led away from the camp toward a solid rock wall. "These are fresh," he said, following them. "The impressions are clear. No dust accumulated inside them." The tracks led directly to the wall and simply stopped, as if Mia had walked straight into the solid stone. Alex was rummaging through the tent. "Her journal's not here," he said. "She must have had it with her when she left." "But I have her journal," James pointed out. "You showed it to me earlier." Alex blinked, in confusion. "That's impossible. This is her tent, her equipment." They both looked down at the journal in Alex's hands, then back at the empty tent. "Maybe it's a duplicate?" Daniela suggested weakly. "Look at this," James called. Having moved closer to the rock wall, his fingers traced over a series of the now familiar circular symbols, barely visible in the sandstone. They matched the ones in her journal. As his fingers passed over the markings, he could have sworn he felt them pulse with warmth. That night, as they slept in their tents pitched near Mia's abandoned campsite, each of them dreamed of circular patterns spiraling endlessly inward. They dreamed of stone that flowed like water and whispered like wind. They dreamed of a presence vast and ancient, stirring far beneath the surface of the earth. And when they woke at dawn, each found they had traced identical circular symbols in the dust beside their sleeping bags. None of them remembered doing it. None of them spoke of it. And as they packed to continue deeper into the maze, none of them noticed how the shadows of the canyon seemed to bend toward them, how the very stone seemed to watch their every move with patient, timeless hunger. Morning brought no clarity to the maze district. If anything, the landscape seemed even more unsettled in the harsh light of day. Formations that had been distinct silhouettes against the night sky now appeared subtly wrong, proportions slightly off, angles impossible when considered too closely. "Radio's dead," Danielle announced, returning from the edge of camp. "No signal on the satellite phone either." "Battery?" James suggested, though he already suspected the answer. "Fully charged." "Just nothing. Like it's being blocked." She tucked the useless device back into her pack. "We should head back while we still have our bearings." Alex shook his head. "Look at these." He pointed to the circular patterns they'd unconsciously drawn during the night. James studied the markings. Each set of concentric circles did seem oriented in the same direction, deeper into the canyon system, toward a narrow gap between two massive hoodoos in the distance. That's where the footprints were headed, he realized, before they disappeared at the wall. "You can't seriously be suggesting we follow whatever this is." Daniela gestured at the markings. This expedition is officially over. As the ranking Park Service representative, I'm ordering an immediate evacuation. Then go, Alex said simply. But I'm finding Mia. James placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. Alex, Daniela's right. Something's very wrong here. We need to report what we found and come back with a proper team. A proper team? Alex's laugh held no humor. The Park Service already searched and found nothing. They've been covering this up for years. Whatever's happening, they're either clueless or complicit. Daniela's hand moved to her sidearm. That's enough conspiracy talk. We're leaving now. Wait, James interrupted, noticing something on the horizon. What is that? Where the two hoodoos stood like ancient sentinels, a shimmer appeared in the air between them, a heat mirage, but vertical rather than horizontal. As they watched, the shimmer intensified, revealing what looked like a narrow passageway that hadn't been visible before. That wasn't there yesterday, Daniela whispered. I'm sure of it. Alex was already shouldering his pack. It's what Mia described in her notes. The passage only appears at certain times. We have to check it out. Stop, Daniela commanded, but Alex was already striding purposefully toward the hoodoos. James hesitated only briefly before following. We'll just take a look. If it's nothing, we'll turn back. Daniela cursed under her breath but followed, her training not allowing her to abandon them, even as her instincts screamed to flee. As they approached the hoodoos, the air grew noticeably heavier. Sound behaved strangely. Their footsteps seemed to reach their ears before they hit the ground. Their breathing echoed before they exhaled. James felt a pressure in his eardrums, like descending in an airplane. Do you feel that? He asked, his voice sounding distorted to his own ears. Alex nodded, his eyes fixed on the passage ahead. It's like gravity is different here. The passage between the hoodoos was narrow enough that they would need to proceed single file. From a distance, it had appeared to be a simple gap between two rock formations. Up close, it revealed itself as something else entirely, a fissure that seemed to cut impossibly deep into the earth, its walls covered with the now familiar circular symbols. These weren't carved, James said, examining the patterns closely. They're part of the stone itself. Indeed, the circular markings weren't surface decorations, but ran through the rock like growth rings in a tree, visible in perfect three-dimensional clarity, as if the stone were transparent only where the symbols appeared. That's geologically impossible, Daniela stated flatly. These formations are sedimentary. They form in horizontal layers over millions of years. There's no natural process that could create these patterns. Unless they aren't natural, Alex suggested, his voice hushed with a mixture of awe and fear. James stepped closer to the passage entrance. The symbols seemed to pulse with a subtle rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. He reached out to touch one. Don't! Daniela grabbed his wrist. We don't know what these do. They're just markings, James said. But even as he spoke, he wasn't entirely convinced. He turned back to Alex, intending to suggest they document everything before proceeding further. But the words died in his throat. Alex stood perfectly still, his movements seeming to occur in slow motion, as if he were underwater. Daniela too had frozen mid-gesture, her mouth open in a warning that never completed. Daniela? James waved his hand in front of her face. Alex. Neither responded. They didn't appear to see him at all, though he stood directly before them. A chill ran down James's spine as he realized he could no longer hear their breathing or the ambient sounds of the desert. The world had gone completely silent. Only the passage remained unchanged, beckoning with its impossible geometry. And now, from deep within, came the first sound James had heard since time slowed. A low, rhythmic thrumming, felt more than heard. It resonated in his chest cavity, syncing with his heartbeat, compelling him forward. James knew he should wait, should try to reconnect with his companions. but the pull was irresistible. One step, then another, into the narrow fissure. The walls of the passage defied normal space. Though no more than 3 feet wide at the entrance, the interior seemed to expand while simultaneously pressing closer. The circular symbols grew more elaborate the deeper he went, now glowing with a faint phosphorescence that cast everything in a sickly blue light. "Hello?" James called, his voice strangely flat in the dead air. "Mia?" Only the thrumming responded, growing stronger with each step. The passage twisted and turned at impossible angles, left bends that somehow led upward, right turns that seemed to circle back, yet continue forward. James quickly lost all sense of direction. After what felt like hours but might have been minutes, the passage widened suddenly into a larger area. Here, the symbols covered every surface in intricate, interlocking patterns that seemed to move when viewed peripherally. James found himself unable to look directly at them for long without experiencing intense vertigo. A small cairn of stones marked the center of the space, human-made, recent. Beneath it, half buried in the sand, lay a digital camera. James's hands trembled as he picked it up. The battery indicator showed full charge. Impossible after 3 weeks in the desert. He pressed the playback button. The screen flickered to life, showing Mia's face, her expression a mixture of terror and exhilaration. "I found it," her recorded voice said, tinny through the small speaker. "The symbols are a language, but not meant to be read. They're meant to be felt. They resonate at specific frequencies that, I think they're altering the rock somehow, at a molecular level, making it malleable. I'm going to try to..." The image shuddered violently. For a split second, something appeared behind Mia, a ripple in the stone wall, forming what looked disturbingly like a face. Then the recording ended. James cycled to the next video. This one showed Mia touching one of the symbols, her finger tracing its circular path. As she completed the pattern, the stone beneath her finger appeared to soften, becoming translucent. "Oh my God," her voice whispered. "It's responding." The next video began with darkness, illuminated only by Mia's headlamp. She was deeper in the passage, her breathing quick and shallow. "I can hear them now," she whispered. "Voices in the stone. They've been here all along. The rock isn't solid. It's a membrane, a barrier between here and somewhere else." The video panned to show a section of wall where the circular symbols glowed brightly. As the camera watched, the symbols began to rotate, creating a dizzying spiral effect. The stone within the spiral rippled like water. "They're coming through." Mia's voice had changed, taking on a reverent quality. The video ended abruptly. There were no more recordings. James slipped the camera into his pocket, his mind racing. Something was very wrong here. Beyond anything his scientific background could explain, he needed to get back to Daniela and Alex to show them what he'd found. Turning to retrace his steps, James froze where the passage had been. There was now only solid wall, covered in glowing symbols. He was trapped. No, not trapped. Something was different. The thrumming had changed pitch, becoming almost melodic, and now beneath it, he could hear what Mia had described. Voices, countless voices, whispering from within the stone. "Hello, Professor," they seemed to say, though no words were actually spoken. "We've been waiting for you." The circular symbols began to rotate, all of them moving in perfect synchronization. The stone rippled, and through the rippling surface, a hand emerged, human in shape, but textured like sandstone. Mia's hand, reaching for him. Outside, in what seemed like another world entirely, Daniela and Alex remained frozen in time, unaware that James Whitaker had vanished into solid stone before their eyes. The stone parted like heavy curtains, and James stepped through into vastness. He stood at the edge of an immense underground chamber that defied all geological possibility. The ceiling arched hundreds of feet overhead, supported by columns of swirled sandstone that resembled DNA helices more than natural formations. The floor descended in concentric circles, like an ancient amphitheater, toward a central depression filled with a substance that resembled water, but moved too slowly, too deliberately. Every surface, walls, floor, ceiling, was covered in the circular symbols, now pulsing with bioluminescent light that shifted in colors from deep indigo to burnt orange. The chamber should have been impossible. They were in sedimentary desert formations, not karst topography that could support such cavernous spaces. Beautiful, isn't it? Mia's voice came from behind him. James turned slowly. Mia Reynolds stood there, but she was changed in ways that made his scientific mind rebel. Her skin had taken on the texture and hue of the surrounding sandstone, the veins beneath her surface running with the same phosphorescent glow as the symbols. Her eyes reflected the light in ways human eyes shouldn't, catching and amplifying it like a nocturnal animal's. "Mia," he managed, his voice catching, "what happened to you?" "I learned to listen." Her voice overlapped with others, some human, some decidedly not, creating an eerie chorus effect. "The stone has always spoken, Professor. Since before humans walked upright, since before mammals drew breath." She approached with an oddly fluid grace, her movement suggesting she was no longer constrained by normal human biomechanics. James fought the urge to step back. "You disappeared 3 weeks ago," he said. "The search parties found nothing. Time moves differently here." Mia gestured to the chamber around them. "I've been here for..." She tilted her head, as if listening to a voice only she could hear. "Much longer. Years, perhaps." "It's difficult to measure." "That's not possible," James insisted, clinging to scientific reality, like a lifeline. "Possibility is just a limitation of perspective." Mia smiled, her teeth now the same color as the surrounding stone. "I found what I was looking for, Professor. The true shapers of this land. The ones who carved the canyons from within. Erosion and tectonic forces shaped these canyons," James stated firmly. "Water, wind, and time." "Tools," Mia corrected. "Tools used by something far older. The indigenous people knew. They left offerings at certain stones, avoided others. The early Mormon settlers knew too. They called this place the land God forgot, but they had it backward. This is the land God remembered first." As she spoke, the symbols on the walls pulsed more intensely. The pool at the center of the chamber rippled, though nothing had disturbed its surface. "What exactly are you saying, Mia?" "I'm saying that life didn't evolve from primordial soup, Professor. It evolved from stone. The oldest intelligence on Earth isn't biological, it's geological, and it's waking up." James shook his head, struggling against the vertigo that threatened to overwhelm him, as the chamber seemed to shift and breathe around them. "That contradicts everything we know about, everything we thought we knew," Mia interrupted. She gestured to the wall beside them. "Watch." The circular symbols began to rotate, creating complex interference patterns. As they did, the solid rock between them became translucent, then transparent, revealing what appeared to be a vast network of veins or roots extending deep into the earth. "The symbols are a language," Mia explained, "a code that rewrites the molecular structure of matter itself. They've been dormant for millennia, waiting for someone to recognize them, to speak them properly. And you can speak them." "I'm learning." Mia placed her hand against the wall. Where her fingers touched, the stone softened like clay. "They?" James asked, though he already feared the answer. In response, faces began to emerge from the walls around them, three-dimensional forms, pushing through solid rock. As if it were liquid, human faces, contorted in expressions that might have been agony or ecstasy. James recognized some from missing persons reports he'd researched before the expedition. "The ones who came before," Mia said. "The ones who found the symbols and began to understand. They're part of it now, part of the awakening. One face pushed further through than the others. A middle-aged man with a park ranger's hat, his features twisted in a silent scream. James recalled Daniela mentioning a search party member who had gone missing 5 years ago. "My God, Mia, what is this place?" "A membrane," she answered. "A threshold between their world and ours. The symbols thin the barrier. Their world, below, within. The entities that shaped the earth from inside. They created these canyons as pathways, as bodies to inhabit once they had vessels capable of completing the connection." "Vessels?" James's mouth had gone dry. "You mean people?" "Consciousness requires form," Mia explained with unsettling serenity. "They've been waiting for the right kind of minds, ones that could comprehend their patterns, internalize their language." She tapped her temple. "Like mine, like yours." The chamber shuddered suddenly, dust and small stones raining from the ceiling. "What's happening?" "They're coming closer to the surface," Mia said, excitement elevating her voice. "The more we interact with the symbols, the thinner the barrier becomes. Every person who traces the patterns, who speaks their language, brings them closer to emergence." The warning signs, James realized with dawning horror. The restricted areas. The Park Service wasn't hiding something, they were containing it. "Too late now." Mia's smile widened unnaturally. "We woke something up, Professor. Something that's been dreaming in stone for eons." The ground beneath James's feet began to soften, the solid sandstone becoming pliant like wet clay. He tried to step back, but his boots had already begun to sink. "Mia, stop this," he shouted, struggling to pull free as the stone rose to his ankles. "I can't stop it," she replied. "I wouldn't if I could. Don't you see? This is the greatest geological discovery in human history. The Earth isn't a dead rock orbiting the sun. It's alive, conscious, and it." Time resumed with a sickening lurch. One moment, Daniela was reaching for James, warning him not to touch the strange symbols. The next, she was grasping empty air. The professor nowhere to be seen. "Professor Whitaker?" she called, her voice tight with alarm. "James." Alex spun in a circle, scanning the surrounding rocks. He was right here, right in front of us. Daniela drew her sidearm, a cold knot forming in her stomach. This is exactly what happened 5 years ago. Hernandez stepped toward a wall covered in those symbols and just vanished. "We need to follow him," Alex insisted, approaching the narrow passage between the hoodoos. "He must have gone through here while we were whatever just happened to us." Disoriented, Daniela supplied, though she knew it was more than that. Time had skipped somehow, leaving them behind. "And no, we are absolutely not going in there. Protocol for unexplained disappearance is immediate evacuation. Protocol." Alex's laugh had a hysterical edge. "2 people are missing now and you're talking about protocol? The same protocol that's kept whatever's happening here a secret?" A low rumble interrupted them, vibrating through the stone beneath their feet, not like an earthquake, more like the growl of a massive beast awakening from hibernation. "What was that?" Alex whispered. The symbols on the rock face beside them began to glow with the same phosphorescence they'd seen in Mia's photographs. As they watched, the circular patterns started to rotate slowly, creating a hypnotic spiral effect. Daniela grabbed Alex's arm. "Don't look at them. Don't focus on the patterns." But it was too late. Alex's eyes were already tracking the spiraling symbols, his pupils dilating unnaturally. When he spoke, his voice had taken on a distant quality. "I can hear them," he murmured. "Voices. So many voices." "Alex." Daniela shook him roughly. "Snap out of it." Another rumble shook the canyon. Stronger this time. Small stones and sand rained down from above. In the distance, a massive slab of rock detached from a cliff face and crashed to the ground with a thunderous impact. "We need to move," Daniela urged, pulling Alex away from the glowing symbols. "Now." Alex blinked rapidly, some awareness returning to his eyes. "Did you feel that? The ground? It's like it's breathing." Daniela had felt it too, a rhythmic rising and falling beneath their feet, subtle but unmistakable, like standing on the chest of some enormous sleeping giant. "Let's head back to the last junction," she decided. "Find higher ground, try to radio for emergency evacuation." They retrieved their packs and began retracing their steps, but nothing looked familiar anymore. Passages that should have led back toward their entry point instead twisted deeper into the canyon system. Landmarks they had passed hours earlier appeared in impossible locations. "We're being herded," Daniela realized, checking her compass for the dozenth time, only to find the needle spinning uselessly. "Every path is leading us further in." The sun was setting now, casting long shadows that seemed to move against the light, reaching toward them like grasping fingers. The air had grown heavy and still, carrying a faint scent, like ozone before a lightning strike. "Listen," Alex said suddenly, stopping in his tracks. Daniela froze, straining to hear. At first, there was only silence. Then, faintly, she caught it. A sound like rushing water, but wrong somehow. Too viscous, too deliberate. Flash flood, she wondered, though the sky remained clear, aside from the strange storm clouds that had been hovering all day. "No," Alex shook his head. "It's coming from below us." The sound grew louder, a rushing, churning noise that seemed to emanate from the very stone beneath their feet. Cracks began to appear in the canyon floor, hairline fractures that spread in, what else? Circular patterns. "Run!" Daniela shouted, just as the ground gave way beneath them. They scrambled up the sloping canyon wall as the floor collapsed, revealing not a pit or a cavern, but a surging mass of what looked like flowing stone, red sandstone, liquefied like lava, but flowing at impossible speeds, forming and reforming into shapes that momentarily resembled limbs, torsos, faces. "Oh God," Alex whispered, clinging to a boulder. "What is that?" The flowing stone surged upward, reaching tendrils toward them that solidified and liquefied in alternating rhythms. One tendril brushed Alex's boot, and he screamed as the leather instantly calcified, becoming the same red sandstone as the surrounding canyon. Daniela fired her sidearm at the approaching mass. The bullet struck and disappeared without effect, absorbed like pebbles dropped into mud. "Move!" she shouted, dragging Alex away from the edge. Up the canyon wall, they climbed frantically, finding handholds in the crumbling sandstone. Below them, the flowing stone filled the canyon floor, rising steadily like a tide. "It's following us," Alex gasped as they reached a ledge 20 feet up, "looking for us." Indeed, the mass seemed to be searching, extending probes up the wall in areas where they had recently climbed, retracting them when they found nothing. Night had fallen completely now, but visibility remained strangely good. The circular symbols had appeared everywhere, on the canyon walls, the rocks around them, even faintly visible in the night sky, as if the stars themselves had rearranged into the same spiraling patterns. "We need to keep moving," Daniela insisted, helping Alex to his feet. "Find higher ground." "Higher won't save us," he responded, his voice odd and detached. "It's not just below, it's everywhere. In the stone, in the air." He rubbed his temples. "The voices are getting louder." "What are they saying?" Daniela asked, hoping to keep him focused. Alex's eyes met hers, wide with terror. "They're saying, 'Welcome home.'" Another rumble shook the canyon, more violent than before. Massive chunks of the cliff face sheared off, crashing into the flowing stone below, which absorbed them without a splash. "James and Mia," Alex said suddenly. "They're part of it now. I can hear them in the chorus." Daniela felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night. "We need to get out of the park. Get help." "Help?" Alex laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. "What kind of help could possibly—" He stopped abruptly, staring over Daniela's shoulder. Daniela turned slowly, already knowing what she would see, but hoping desperately to be wrong. James Whitaker stood on the ledge behind them. Though stood was perhaps the wrong word. His lower body had fused with the stone, as if he were growing out of the cliff face itself. His skin had taken on the reddish hue and texture of the surrounding sandstone, veined with glowing circular patterns. His eyes shone with the same phosphorescent light. "There you are," he said, his voice overlapping with others, just as Mia's had in the video. "We've been looking for you." Daniela raised her weapon. "Stay back." "Daniela," he smiled, the expression all wrong on his transformed face. "There's nothing to fear. Quite the opposite. We've discovered something miraculous." "We?" Alex asked, his voice shaking. James gestured, and a section of the cliff face beside him rippled and parted. Mia stepped through, her transformation even more complete than James's. Her body seemed to flow rather than move. Stone become flesh, become stone again, with each step. "The passage has always been here," Mia said, her voice resonating strangely, waiting for the right minds to open it. "The symbols are keys. The stone is a door." "A door to what?" Daniela demanded, keeping her gun trained on them both. "To them," James and Mia answered in unison, their voices harmonizing unnaturally. "The Shapers, the first intelligence, the ones who dreamed the world into being, and then slept within it." The stone beneath Daniela and Alex began to shift, softening like warm wax. "Join us," Mia urged, extending a hand that was more stone than flesh. "Become part of something greater than humanity, something that will exist long after the last human draws breath." "No." Daniela grabbed Alex's arm. "We need to move. Now." But Alex didn't respond. He was staring at the circular symbols now covering his own skin, glowing softly in the darkness. "Alex." He turned to her, his eyes beginning to shine with the same inner light as James and Mia. "I can hear them clearly now," he whispered. "They're beautiful, Daniela, ancient and vast and patient. They've been waiting so long." The stone around Alex's feet had begun to climb his legs like living clay. "Fight it," Daniela urged, trying to pull him free. "It doesn't hurt," Alex said wonderingly. "It feels like..." Daniela made a desperate decision. She struck Alex hard across the face with the butt of her pistol, knocking him unconscious. As he slumped, she caught him, straining under his weight. The flowing stone hesitated, then withdrew slightly from Alex's unconscious form. "Interesting," James observed clinically. "Consciousness is required for the bonding process." "You're not taking him," Daniela snarled, dragging Alex's limp body away from the edge. "Oh, Daniela." Mia's voice was almost pitying. "We're not taking anyone. We're giving purpose, giving eternity." "You're not Mia anymore," Daniela said, backing away. "You're not James. You're something else using their bodies, their memories." "We are more than we were," James corrected. "And soon everyone will be." The rumbling intensified, the entire canyon system shaking now. In the distance, massive rock formations began to collapse, in reform and new configurations. The very landscape was reshaping itself. "It's beginning," Mia announced, a terrible joy in her voice. "The awakening." With a strength born of desperation, Daniela hoisted Alex over her shoulder in a fireman's carry and began to climb one-handed up the canyon wall, away from James and Mia, away from the flowing stone still rising below. "You can't escape," James called after her. "The stone is everywhere. We are everywhere." Daniela didn't look back, focusing only on the next handhold, the next foothold, the weight of Alex on her shoulders, and the desperate hope that somewhere beyond this nightmare canyon, the world was still as she remembered it. Alex Carver awoke to pain and darkness. His head throbbed where Daniela had struck him, and his mouth tasted of copper and dust. He lay on hard stone, a thin emergency blanket beneath him. Above, stars wheeled in impossible configurations, forming circular patterns that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Daniela?" he called, his voice echoing strangely in the night air. No answer came. He was alone. Sitting up carefully, Alex took stock of his surroundings. He was on a high ledge, overlooking the maze of canyons. In the moonlight, he could see that the landscape below had changed dramatically. Spires had risen where none had been before. Canyons had widened, narrowed, or disappeared entirely. The entire maze district was reshaping itself, like clay being molded by invisible hands. Most disturbing of all were the movements within the stone itself, ripples passing through solid rock, bulges forming and receding, as if something massive was swimming just beneath the surface. Alex looked down at his arms, remembering the glowing symbols that had begun to appear on his skin. They were gone now, but he could still feel them beneath the surface, like tattoos etched on his bones rather than his flesh. And the voices, they remained, though fainter now, a constant murmur at the edge of his consciousness, speaking words he almost understood in a language older than language itself. A small note was tucked beneath the emergency blanket, written in Daniela's precise handwriting. "Alex had to find help. Stay here. Don't look at the symbols. Don't touch the stone. I'll come back with extraction team. D. P.S. Use the camera. Record everything." His backpack lay nearby. Inside, he found his camera, extra batteries, water, and emergency rations. Daniela had left him everything he needed to survive for at least 2 days. But she was gone, either fled or taken. And he was alone with the voices and the moving stone. Alex checked the time, 3:47 a.m. He had been unconscious for hours. The transformation that had begun to claim him had receded, but he could feel it waiting just beneath his skin, patient and insidious. Focus, he told himself, fighting against the whispers that urged him to surrender, to become one with the stone. He powered on the camera and began recording, narrating in a hoarse whisper. "This is Alex Carver, Day 4 in Canyonlands National Park, Maze District. Something is happening here. Professor Whitaker and Mia Reynolds have been changed. Ranger Ortiz is missing. The landscape itself is moving, reshaping. I think the park is waking up." He panned the camera across the transformed landscape below. In the camera's night vision mode, the flowing patterns in the stone were clearly visible, massive currents moving through solid rock like blood through veins. The circular symbols appear to be some kind of language, he continued, trying to maintain scientific detachment even as terror clawed at his throat. They affect the molecular structure of the stone, making it malleable. They also affect human consciousness, creating auditory hallucinations and inducing a state of receptivity. A massive shudder passed through the canyon system. A spire half a mile away suddenly twisted, spiraling upward like a massive screw drilling into the night sky. The sound it made, stone grinding against stone, was like the shriek of a living thing. Alex's hands shook as he zoomed in with the camera. The transformation is accelerating. The entire park appears to be reconfiguring itself according to some pattern I can't fully perceive. Movement caught his eye. Far below, figures were emerging from the canyon walls, human-shaped but wrong in fundamental ways. They moved with liquid grace, their bodies fusing with and separating from the stone as they walked. Some he recognized James and Mia, leading what appeared to be a procession of the transformed. And behind them, rising from the canyon floor, a massive shape was taking form, a colossal figure composed of flowing stone, its features constantly shifting, but suggesting something vaguely humanoid on an impossible scale. It must have been 100 feet tall, and still growing. "Oh God," Alex whispered, zooming in further. "They're building it a body." The transformed humans were touching the canyon walls, the circular symbols glowing where their fingers traced patterns. With each completed symbol, more stone flowed into the massive figure, adding mass and definition. Alex's camera battery warning flashed red. He fumbled to change it, unwilling to miss documenting what was happening. As he did, a sharp pain lanced through his temples. The voices grew louder, more insistent. Join us. See through stone eyes. Feel through stone skin. Become eternal. No, Alex grunted, pressing his palms against his ears, though he knew the voices came from within. Stay focused. Fresh battery installed. He continued recording. The procession below had begun to move in a circular pattern around the growing stone colossus, their movements ritualistic and synchronized. As they moved, the ground beneath them flowed and shifted, creating new patterns in the earth itself, patterns visible only from above. With horrifying clarity, Alex realized he was witnessing the formation of an enormous version of the circular symbol carved into the landscape itself. It's a signal, he said into the camera. They're reshaping the land to create a symbol visible from orbit, a beacon. To call the others, the voices agreed in his mind. A new sound cut through the night, the whomp-whomp of helicopter rotors. A searchlight swept across the canyons below. Hope surged in Alex's chest. Daniela had made it out. She had brought help. But as quickly as it appeared, the hope died. The procession below had noticed the helicopter too. As one, they raised their arms toward it. The stone beneath them surged upward in massive tentacle-like columns, reaching for the aircraft. No! Alex screamed uselessly as one stone column struck the helicopter's tail rotor. The aircraft spun wildly, its searchlight carving drunken arcs through the darkness, before it crashed into a canyon wall and exploded in a ball of orange flame. The voices in Alex's head cheered in unified triumph. The massive stone figure below turned its featureless face upward, seeming to look directly at Alex on his high perch. Though it had no eyes, he felt seen, examined, evaluated. You resist still, the voices noted with something like amusement, but you have been marked. The symbols are within you now. You belong to the stone. As if in response to the thought, pain flared across Alex's skin. He looked down in horror to see the circular symbols reappearing, pushing up from beneath his flesh like brands from the inside. No, he gasped, scrambling to his feet. No, no, no. He had to move. Had to get away. Had to warn someone. The only path led further up the canyon wall, toward the rim. Alex grabbed his pack and began to climb, fingers bleeding as they scraped against the rough stone. Below, the procession had begun to ascend toward his position, moving with unnatural speed. Stay away from me, he shouted, though he knew it was futile. The pain intensified as the symbols spread across his body. With each one that appeared, the voices grew louder, more persuasive. The stone beneath his hands began to soften, reaching for him like living clay. In desperate panic, Alex pulled out his pocket knife and began to scrape at the symbols on his arms, carving through his own skin to disrupt the patterns. Blood welled and spilled, but where it touched the stone, the red liquid hardened instantly into tiny circular formations. Get out of my head, he gasped, climbing higher despite the pain. Get out of my body. A familiar voice called his name, James's voice, but distorted, layered with others. Alex, it called. Don't fight it. It's wonderful once you surrender. Become part of something eternal. Alex looked down to see his former professor scaling the cliff face below him, moving with inhuman speed and grace, his body merging with the stone and emerging again as he climbed. You're not James, Alex called back, resuming his desperate ascent. You're something wearing his face. I am James, and more than James, the thing replied. The rim of the canyon was tantalizingly close now, perhaps 50 feet above. Beyond it lay the desert plateau, and somewhere in the distance, roads, civilization, normality. If he could just reach it. The stone beneath Alex's right hand suddenly softened and engulfed his fingers like quicksand. He screamed, trying to pull free, but the stone hardened again, trapping his hand. No escape. James's voice called from below. Closer now. No one leaves the maze. With his free hand, Alex fumbled in his pack and pulled out Daniela's flare gun. Without hesitation, he fired it directly into the stone encasing his hand. The magnesium flare burned with blinding intensity, heating the stone to cracking temperature in seconds. Alex pulled with all his strength, feeling skin tear as his hand came free, leaving blood and tissue behind. Cradling his mangled hand against his chest, he continued climbing one-handed, driven by terror and desperate determination. The rim was close now, so close. His vision swam, darkness encroaching at the edges. Blood loss and exhaustion were taking their toll. The voices grew louder, more seductive. Why run? Where will you go? The stone is everywhere. We are everywhere. With a final desperate lunge, Alex grabbed the edge of the canyon rim and pulled himself over. He lay gasping on flat ground, staring up at the star-filled sky where the circular patterns still pulsed and shifted. The transformation was spreading through him, rapidly now. He could feel the stone replacing his flesh, cell by cell, bone by bone. Soon he would be like James and Mia, a human shell filled with ancient consciousness. With shaking hands, he retrieved the camera from his pack and pointed it at his own face. "My name is Alex Carver," he gasped into the lens. "If you find this, stay away from Canyonlands." The warning signs, they weren't for our protection. They were to keep it contained. But it's too late now. It's waking up. He broke off, choking as the transformation reached his throat. "Run," he managed finally. "Run while you still can." The camera fell from his stiffening fingers as the stone claimed him completely, leaving only his eyes human, staring in mute horror at what he had become. The emergency response team found him at dawn, wandering the desert 10 miles from the canyon rim. His clothes were torn and crusted with blood. His skin was blistered from sun exposure. His eyes stared vacantly, seeing things that weren't there. Subject located. The search team leader radioed back to base. Adult male, early 30s, severely dehydrated, possible psychosis, matches description of missing hiker, Alex Carver. Alex didn't resist as they guided him to the medical helicopter. He didn't speak as they inserted IV fluids and wrapped him in thermal blankets. He simply stared at the red rock formations in the distance, his lips moving in silent conversation with voices only he could hear. "Where are the others?" a park ranger asked him once they were airborne. "Professor Whitaker, Ranger Ortiz?" Alex turned slowly, focusing on the ranger with difficulty. "Gone," he whispered, his voice like sandpaper, joined with the stone, became part of it. The ranger and medic exchanged concerned glances. "Heat stroke," the medic murmured. "Dehydration, psychosis." "The symbols," Alex continued, his fingers tracing circular patterns on the blanket covering his legs. "They're a language, a code. They make the stone." He trailed off, his eyes losing focus again. "Make the stone what?" the ranger prompted gently. Alex's gaze sharpened suddenly, his hand shooting out to grip the ranger's wrist with surprising strength. "Alive," he hissed. "The stone is alive." Back at park headquarters, a grim-faced superintendent listened to the debriefing. 3 missing, presumed dead. The operations chief summarized. 1 survivor with severe dehydration and psychological trauma. No sign of Ranger Ortiz or the missing professor. "And the anomalies?" the superintendent asked quietly. The chief hesitated. "Widespread. The entire maze district shows evidence of unauthorized geological activity." "Unauthorized," the superintendent repeated with a humorless smile. "That's one way to put it. Any satellite imagery?" "Yes, sir. The chief slid a folder across the desk. "These came in an hour ago." The superintendent examined the photos with a deepening frown. From above, the maze district was visibly altered. Canyons had shifted. New formations had appeared overnight. Most disturbing of all, the entire area now formed an enormous circular pattern, identical to the symbols found throughout the park. "It's accelerating," he said finally. "Faster than we projected. The NPS containment protocols have failed," the superintendent interrupted. "We need to move to level 5 containment." "Sir," the chief said carefully, "that would require evacuation of all adjacent areas within 50 miles. Thousands of people. The media attention will be managed," the superintendent finished firmly. "National security protocols are already in place. This gets classified above top secret, effective immediately." At Moab Regional Hospital, doctors struggled to make sense of Alex Carver's condition. His vital signs were stable, but brain scans showed bizarre activity, patterns that one neurologist described as impossibly synchronized, like his entire brain is operating as a single cell. More concerning were the anomalies in his tissue samples. Under the microscope, his cellular structure showed progressive calcification, with crystalline structures forming that matched the mineral composition of Canyonlands sandstone. "It's like his body is turning to stone from the inside out," one bewildered pathologist reported. "I've never seen anything like it." In his hospital room, Alex sat motionless, staring at the wall where he alone could see circular symbols forming and dissolving. The voices were constant now, a chorus of ancients whispering secrets of stone and time. When the FBI agents arrived to interview him, he spoke only in fragmented observations that made little sense to them. "The canyons are bodies," he told them. "Vessels. The rivers are their blood. The caves are their mouths." "Mr. Carver," the lead agent said patiently, "we need to know what happened to Professor Whitaker and Ranger Ortiz." "They're still there," Alex replied. "Part of it now. Part of the awakening." "Part of what awakening?" Alex's eyes focused suddenly, becoming unnervingly clear. "The oldest intelligence on Earth. It shaped the continents from within, created mountain ranges as its spine, river systems as its veins. It's been sleeping, dreaming, in stone, but now it's waking up." The agents exchanged glances. "And how do you know this, Mr. Carver?" Alex smiled faintly, tapping his temple. "They told me. They're still telling me. The symbols are a key that unlocks perception. Once you see them, really see them, you understand." "They? Who are they?" "The first ones. The Shapers. They were here before the dinosaurs, before the first mammals. They created humans as interfaces, as vessels." Alex leaned forward intently. "We're not the dominant species on Earth. We never were. We're just nerve endings for something vaster." Later, reviewing Alex's medical files, the lead agent made a discovery that chilled his blood. Hidden among the CT scans was an image of Alex's skull showing strange formations in the bone itself, circular patterns identical to those found in the Canyonlands rocks. Meanwhile, seismologists across the Southwest reported unusual activity throughout the Four Corners region. The tremors didn't match typical tectonic movements. They occurred in regular, almost rhythmic patterns. One scientist, studying the frequency patterns, made a disturbing observation. "These aren't random, they're sequenced, like a code or language." 3 days after Alex's rescue, his camera was recovered from the canyon rim. Most of the footage was corrupted, but several clear images remained. Professor Whitaker, with skin like sandstone, his eyes glowing with unnatural light. Mia Reynolds emerging from solid rock, as if walking through a curtain. Massive stone formations, moving and reshaping themselves against all laws of physics and geology. Most disturbing was Alex's final recording, his face partially transformed, his voice desperate as he warned, "Run while you still can." The superintendent stood at the edge of the newly established quarantine zone, watching as massive concrete barriers were positioned across access roads. Military personnel in hazmat suits moved efficiently, setting up containment protocols originally designed for biological outbreaks. "Will it hold?" asked the Interior Department official who had flown in from Washington. "No," the superintendent answered honestly. "The stone doesn't recognize our boundaries. What's happening underneath?" He gestured to the ground beneath their feet. "It's spreading through the bedrock. These barriers might as well be made of paper. Then why bother? To slow it down, to warn people away. That's all we can do now." New warning signs were being installed along the perimeter. Larger, more ominous than before. Restricted area. No entry under any circumstances. Violators will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Will anyone heed them? The official wondered. The superintendent shook his head. People never do. They see a warning sign, and they want to know why. They want to see for themselves. It's human nature. At Moab Regional Hospital, Alex Carver sat by his window, watching the sunset paint the distant mazes in shades of red and gold. The circular patterns covered his skin now, no longer hidden beneath the surface. His fingertips had hardened completely to stone. A nurse entered to check his vital signs, her eyes widening at the transformation that had progressed since her last visit. "Mr. Carver, are you in pain? Should I call the doctor?" Alex turned to her, his eyes glowing faintly in the dimming light. "It doesn't hurt," he said, his voice overlapping with others. "Quite the opposite. It feels like becoming." "Becoming what?" she asked, backing toward the door. Alex smiled, his teeth now the color of sandstone. "What we were always meant to be. The interface between worlds." He turned back to the window, placing his hand against the glass. Beneath his touch, the solid pane began to soften and flow like water. "The symbols are everywhere now," he said. "Once you know how to see them, in the rocks, in the soil, in human bones and blood and brain, the key was always inside us, waiting to be turned." That night, as the quarantine zone expanded to encompass Moab itself, tourists at Arches National Park reported a strange phenomenon. If you stood still at dawn or dusk, you could hear whispers coming from within the stone formations. Many described the voices as strangely familiar or calling my name specifically. By morning, the first cases of spontaneous transformation appeared in Moab. A gas station attendant whose hands had begun to calcify, a hotel clerk whose eyes had developed the telltale phosphorescent glow, a child whose skin was covered in circular patterns that the parents insisted hadn't been there the night before. A hastily established research team examined core samples from throughout the region. What they found defied explanation. The molecular structure of the sandstone was changing at a fundamental level, becoming more organized, more like biological tissue than mineral. "It's as if the stone itself is evolving," one geologist reported, "developing neural network-like properties." In Washington, an emergency meeting of the National Security Council convened to address what was now classified as the Canyonlands anomaly. Satellite imagery revealed that the circular pattern visible in the Maze District was now replicated in smaller versions throughout the Four Corners region. More disturbing was the discovery that these patterns aligned precisely with ancient petroglyphs found throughout the area, patterns previously thought to be unrelated. The indigenous peoples knew, an anthropologist explained to the grim-faced officials. Every tribe in the region has stories about the ones who sleep in stone. They left warnings in their art, their stories, even in the placement of their settlements, always keeping distance from certain rock formations. And we built tourist attractions on top of them, the Secretary of the Interior said bitterly. 1 week after Alex Carver's rescue, he vanished from his hospital room, leaving behind only a fine red dust on his bed. The glass in his window was undamaged, but had somehow become permeable, flowing like syrup. then solidifying after his passage. The last security footage showed him standing by the window, his transformation nearly complete, his body more stone than flesh. He had turned to the camera with a serene smile and said words that would haunt those who reviewed the tape. The awakening cannot be stopped. The stone remembers what it was before it was stone, what it will be again. We are merely returning to our original state. 2 months after the initial incident, the quarantine zone encompassed the entire Four Corners region. Official explanations cited geological instability and toxic mineral deposits to justify the evacuation of tens of thousands of people. Unofficially, the military had established a perimeter around an area where the laws of physics and geology were breaking down completely, where stone flowed like water, where human beings transformed into something other, where massive formations rose and fell like the breathing of some colossal entity. National Park Rangers were now replaced by special forces units trained to intercept stone walkers, transformed humans attempting to leave the quarantine zone. Their orders were shoot to kill, though bullets proved largely ineffective against bodies that could merge with and emerge from solid rock. The highest levels of government debated more drastic containment measures, from tactical nuclear strikes to experimental sonic weapons designed to disrupt the molecular patterns emerging in the stone. But every scientist who studied the phenomenon reached the same conclusion. It was too late. Whatever had awakened beneath Canyonlands was spreading through the bedrock itself, following ancient fault lines and underground river systems, reaching toward population centers with patient, inexorable purpose. At what had once been the visitor center for Canyonlands National Park, now a military command post, a young lieutenant stood watch at dawn. In the distance, the transformed landscape pulsed with inner light, massive formations rising and falling in rhythmic patterns. The circular symbols had grown to such scale that they were visible from space, glowing like beacons in night satellite imagery. A civilian jeep approached the checkpoint, stopping at the massive concrete barriers. The driver, a middle-aged man with camping gear piled in the back, rolled down his window as the lieutenant approached. "Sorry, sir," the lieutenant said. "This entire area is restricted by federal order. You'll need to turn around." The man gestured at the park beyond the barriers. "Canyonlands closed, but I drove all the way from Chicago. The website didn't say anything about closures. It's an emergency situation, sir. Geological instability. Extremely dangerous." The man frowned, studying the warning signs with skepticism. "Geological instability? You mean like earthquakes? Doesn't look unstable to me." "Sir, I need you to turn your vehicle around immediately. This is for your own safety." The man sighed, clearly annoyed. Fine. Came all this way for nothing." As he prepared to turn around, he glanced once more at the distant rock formations. For just a moment, his expression changed. A flicker of recognition, of longing. "Beautiful though, isn't it?" he said softly. "Something about those rocks calls to you." The lieutenant tensed, hand moving to his sidearm. "Sir, have you been here before?" "No," the man said, still staring at the distant formations. "But somehow, it feels like coming home." He shook his head as if clearing it, then smiled apologetically. "Sorry, that sounded weird. I'll head back to Moab, find somewhere else to hike." The lieutenant watched the jeep drive away, a cold knot forming in his stomach. He'd seen that look before, the beginning of awareness, of recognition. The man would be back. They always came back once the stone had whispered to them. He reported the incident, knowing what would happen next. The man would be tracked, monitored, eventually detained when the circular patterns began to appear on his skin. Another victim of the awakening. The lieutenant turned back to his post, gazing at the transformed landscape beyond the barriers. In the early morning light, he could almost convince himself that the massive formations were just unusual rock structures, not the partially emerged body of something vast and ancient and patient. Almost. But then the stone would shift slightly, pulsing with inner light, and he would remember the briefing videos, the footage of Professor Whitaker and Mia Reynolds emerging from solid rock, the final warning from Alex Carver before he too was claimed by the transformation. The lieutenant touched the warning sign beside him, its bold letters stark against the red background. Danger restricted area. Do not enter. Humanity's last, futile defense against something that had been waiting since before humans existed, a warning that would go unheeded, because people always wanted to see for themselves, to understand the danger firsthand. He knew the truth now, the truth that the highest levels of government had accepted but couldn't acknowledge publicly. The warning signs weren't to keep people out of danger. They were to slow the spread of what had already escaped. In the distance, the ancient intelligence continued to awaken, stone by stone, voice by voice, mind by mind, patient and inevitable as the mountains themselves.